All right, so are you curious as to how your performance and savings stacked up for your operation? Let's dive into the Operations Center to take a look at the tools that can give you those valuable insights. All right, so the first place we're going to take a look at is the Work Analyzer. This is going to give us that broad overview of the overall season performance. This is going to be located in the Work Analyzer tab. So make sure you're looking at the application for 2025, and then we can filter out which machines we're going to look at, as well as the technology that we want to utilize. So you'll then see the data comparisons to give you a better understanding of how you utilized See Spray and how it affected the performance on your operation. Some examples of this are going to include anything from acres on versus off, productivity while using the See Spray technology, your fuel consumption, as well as the season totals for acres saved of product, and then the average savings percentages. From this page here, we can export that data in a variety of reports to help you dig down even deeper into the data. We can share it, we can export it, and there's a button on the top right of the screen here that we can choose to either download it, and then we can download detailed reports as well as summarized reports in that particular page. So these reports can play a pivotal role in our decision making as far as the chemistry programs that we're going to purchase for the next year. The age-old question that we've had is, how much product am I going to need for this next coming season if I'm using See Spray? Whereas in the past with a broadcast application, we typically knew how much chemistry we were going to use. With See Spray, that got more challenging, but with these reports, we can pull more detailed information to give us a really good picture of what we're going to utilize going forward, as long as our weed pressures remain similar to year over year. Hopefully it getting better year over year, but this is going to definitely give us a really good idea how to make those purchasing decisions. In addition to the reports that we've just spoken about, while you're in the Work Analyzer application, we could pull a PDF report of the applied rate and weed pressure maps. That's going to include the See Spray performance information for particular fields, and that can be useful visuals when you have those printed out binders of your maps and your yield maps and your as applied maps, things to help you make better decisions for the next season. For a more detailed look at the See Spray data, we can dive into the Field Analyzer application. And you can get to Field Analyzer by selecting individual fields on the map. Otherwise, we can go to the Analyze tab and find the Field Analyzer application, which will essentially bring you back to the map where you select the boundaries and the fields that you want to analyze. From there, we can view all of the See Spray recorded data layers, as well as comparing them to maybe the yield map from the previous year, or maybe a tillage map, to see how those different operational layers actually relate to one another. So another example of putting one of these map layers to use would be, in particular, our weed pressure map. So when you do a See Spray pass through the field, it generates where those actual weeds are in your field. So that can give us valuable insights into different ways we want to target those problem areas, whether that be changing up our tillage in those areas, or maybe even different crop rotations, as well as using different chemistry, maybe tank mixes, maybe being a little more aggressive in those areas. And we can use those weed pressure maps as a base layer for prescription maps to go in and maybe be more aggressive with our pre's in certain areas of the field that have more weed pressure. So coming out of the post-season review and kind of planning for the next season, we're going to actually move into what can we do to monitor the performance of our machines and our chemistry usage in season. So when it comes to that, there's a few different resources we have available to us through the Operations Center web, as well as the Operations Center mobile. This is going to be our home tab on the web and the home tab in the mobile application. It's going to give us all the updated machine information, as well as performance metrics related to the field operation that machine is doing. This is going to give us a really good at-a-glance sort of review of the field operations day to day. Things like fuel usage, things like where the machine currently is, where the machine has been, how much product has that machine used, what's our performance metrics as far as how much chemistry that machine has actually used over a certain area of our farm. So valuable insights that can be helpful in making management decisions on the fly, especially when we're talking tendering. This can give operators more confidence in where they need to send their tender operators and how much chemistry they're going to need each tendering event. Another benefit that we can realize with these in-season monitoring tools is going to be the valuable insights we gain from any sort of fallback event with the See Spray machine. We'll be able to monitor what those fallback reasons are so that we can remedy that going forward. So a couple takeaways from this section. At the very least, let's go into our work analyzer and review what we've done this previous season to help us get a benchmark of where we've been so that we can make those decisions to help us in the coming season ahead. If you've got any other further questions related to See Spray or your operations center data, feel free to reach out to the C&B Support Center at 507-200-3060.